Robbie, why don't you come up and we'll start with you. You are the first victim. So I first met you at a conversation that we did at the National Conference for Volunteering and Service. And we were down in New Orleans. And one of the things that I think is absolutely incredible and wonderful is that in response to Katrina, we have seen people from all over the country, all over the world, come down to New Orleans and contribute their time and their expertise, and in some cases, their investment dollars. And you're at the center of that. It seems to me that at the core of one of the challenges in advertising and marketing is this idea of brand and this idea of creating something that you're about or supposed to be about. And my argument would be that brand is about experience. So your brand is directly tied to whether or not you have that impact or not. You used to create brands. Now you are a brand. Now, maybe you were a brand before, but you see where I'm going with this. Inevitably, you're not going to live up to the promise that you have set. And you've set a very lofty goal with Naked Pizza and the impact and the change that you're intending to have. How do we break this cycle that brand is important, and talking about brand and developing brand and creating our marks and all of these things to establish our brand is so important, and get to the point where we're comfortable with the idea that if we succeed, that is our brand. If we fail, that is our brand, and there's something positive in that.
Well, I mean, again, I think there's two recognitions, right? One is that I think modern marketers, successful marketers, understand that brand is an inside-out construct. That there's a great definition a guy named Chris Riley put out that said a brand is a business idea that attains cultural influence, or you could apply it to an organization. So the concept of cultural influence is a fascinating consideration when you think about where do you exist. So cultural influence doesn't necessarily say you're selling more. It says you're developing relationships within a particular set of objectives, and you're going to apply that process in such a way as to achieve a certain level of impact. So it could be very much a profit-driven sort of impact, or it could be a cause-driven. But the modern platform and the modern marketplace is essentially saying, I'm going to evaluate your organization. I have the means of evaluating your organization in a number of different ways. And so that opens up a whole other set of considerations in terms of the influence you can have within an organization. So the vernacular is important. I mean, most people here are writers, and most people, they value words and they value the language. So brand has been abused like everything else, right? Sustainability, I mean, what have you. It has about a 2-day shelf life, and then it's in the shitter. So, but brand as essentially an act of behavior, as an act of authenticity, as something that is measured externally as much as it is measured internally, is something that's a very powerful idea. And if you can get that sort of conversation going within an organization, you can start to move from a wider place and start to winnow down into something that I think you can actually have some impact with.
So, but then is brand more important now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, pre-Katrina, at least in the context of New Orleans? It seems to me that, the outside world, like we're all in some semblance of marketing or communications or nonprofit work. So we obsess about things like brand and how well are we known. Walk outside, nobody cares. Nobody can repeat anything. Nobody can state the mission statement of Naked Pizza. But if they like the pizza, they'll eat the pizza. You're having a cultural impact, but who cares about the
Absolutely. But again, the artifacts are not useful. The artifacts that used to define a brand, so a perfect logo, a perfect tagline, a color palette, or a design guideline, those are becoming less and less important. They still matter. I think aesthetics and style still have a great deal of contribution to ultimately understanding and distilling, but behavior matters more. Function matters more. Utility matters more. Are you creating sustainability in intelligent ways? I mean, I think those sort of measures, which now exist in ways, again, are much more readily available to us to discuss and use as a means of guiding, the objective. So, within social media, people who practice social media understand what sort of metrics or what sort of performance is being evaluated, and that's more externally driven than it is internally driven in many respects. So you do move beyond the idea of saying, let's spend $300,000, with Interbrands to create the perfect logo, and because that will be the most important artifact of our brand, as opposed to saying, what are our pure objectives, and are we really getting at it, and where are we short, and who do we need to collaborate with in order to achieve them?
So one of the arguments I've heard you make in the past is that New Orleans had all of the capacity to do good, to do better for itself pre-Katrina, but it needed Katrina as the instigator. And in some cases, it needed the outside influence and the outside investment to accelerate what you were doing. If you reverse that out, short of a catastrophic disaster like New Orleans experienced, what could other communities take away from New Orleans? What could Newark, which is struggling, take from the experience short of a catastrophic experience so that we don't have to wait around for something to happen before we change?
I thought about it last night, and last night it sort of crystallized. The idea of the rapid prototype, structured R&D, is something that I think is important. So the lessons of Katrina for New Orleans was that there were assets that were basically misunderstood or misapplied, and it took the severity of that tragic event for people to better reconcile what those problems were and what those assets were and how they were going to be applied, how we're going to solve those problems, how we're going to apply those assets. So there was sort of that malaise associated with, what's wrong with it, what's good with it, and, all the human nature that comes into play within that sort of circumstance where, you can criticize it, but people from the outside can't criticize it. And so as a result, New Orleans had become very defensive and insular. So I think, like most problems don't happen overnight. Typically in communities like Newark or Los Angeles, they sort of creep up on you, and there's no real sort of confrontation or moment of truth that people sort of confront it with. And I think what you're seeing now, though, in this sort of new economy, and again, maybe it was a catastrophic event, in terms of the global recession that has created that, but I think much more of a focus on structured R&D. So the rapid prototyping model, I'm a big fan of the Y Combinator model, the idea of saying, bring a problem to the table, vet and evaluate that in a very precise way. So it's not looking for that big home run hit. It's about the idea of saying that, you'll have many, once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, the Collins sort of approach to things, that suggests that if you're a smart, committed person and you understand the tools, and you wake up every day trying to apply those tools, if you are provided a structured environment to solve a particular issue that may be on your mind at that particular moment, or you may have met somebody that drives it, then vet that out in a proper way, see if it actually gets some traction. If it does, bring the necessary people to it. If it doesn't, move on. You're a smart person, you know how to work with people, you understand the tools, find something else where you can have an impact. So instead of the home run, let's find out whether there's a solid sort of opportunity within an idea or an application, and let's see if it has value. If not, let's move on to something else.
So there's an argument that not as much has been accomplished in New Orleans as could be or would like to. So what is that one thing that you want in the context of New Orleans, or in the context of your areas of focus in New Orleans, that you want people to be doing? What is the priority that still has not been embraced?
I mean, my sense, and in particular in the nonprofit world, but it applies beyond that, is really to eliminate redundancy. And I would, that within any given, the old model, and a lot of the foundations live within that model where they get, $10 and they decide that they need to give $1 to everyone, as opposed to really the intellectual honesty associated with, we have a vetting process, we understand what we're trying to accomplish, and we're going to make a decision about that. But there's too much redundancy, there's too much ineffectiveness within any given solution construct, and there's not enough conversation about what works and what doesn't work right now. So again, the definition of impact is pretty malleable under any circumstances. You could say compassion is enough or solving the problem is enough, and you can make a good argument for either side of that. But just choose one, decide who's redundant and who's not. And I think, specifically for organizations, and I think it's for profit as well, the idea of that, that bullshit mission statement that you engrave on the wall and you pass by every day and it means nothing, increasingly so with each day that passes, should be rewritten every single year. The world moves, nothing stands still.
So it's very easy to say we can do more and we should be doing that. Limited bandwidth, limited energy, limited ability to focus. What do we need to stop doing? What is the thing you remove as the barrier that opens up the opportunity to go and revisit some of these mission statements or whatnot every year?
The one thing,
you knew the question was coming.
Yeah, I know it was. The redundancy issue is the one that sort of, I think.
But you already answered that, so you can't say it again. That would be redundant.
Yeah. Well, shit. It probably gets back to that notion of chasing money. I think if there was one thing that you shouldn't put that as the fundraising objective within most organization. I think typically is the conversation that takes you away from really what it is that you woke up in that morning to achieve. So the one thing is, don't start with the money.
Good enough. You have survived. Congratulations.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you a...
Thank you so much.